So I list my properties on affordablehousing.com, which is for people on Section 8. And then I have really good relationships with all the housing authorities, and I still list on Zillow. Like Zillow probably gets me the best leads still, right? But all the housing authorities, like I bring them lunch. They know me, like, so a lot of times, anytime I have an available unit, I email it to them and I say, hey, look, or if I know I have a vacancy coming up, I email it to every housing authority I work with and say, hey, I get a 3-bed, 1-bath, this price, excuse me. And, it's available this date. And a lot of times they'll fill it for me. So a lot of times I don't actually have to list it at all. So, which is great. And the housing authorities aren't going to send me bad people because they like working with me. So, if they know someone's getting evicted, they're not going to be like, hey, Mike, rent to this person, and I have a really good relationship too with the inspectors. Right. So a lot of times when I get somebody applying for my unit, I see what housing authority they're with and I know who the inspector is. So I'll shoot the inspector a text message and say, hey, if you were me, would you rent to this person? ? And I don't know if they're supposed to respond to me or not, but they do. So, and they let me know like yes or no, because these inspectors are in their units at least once a year doing inspections, right? So they're going to know who is a really good tenant who just has a bad landlord or who's a terrible tenant who you shouldn't rent to. So, and then my screening process. So I do a few things. So I've been lied to basically about everything on a rental application before, right? So when I go into like, and I tell people this way, so if you get 10 applications, right, 5 of them are going to look good, but 2 of them are good. So it's your job to find the 2 that are good. If you find one of the ones that's good, you'll have an amazing tenant who lives there forever. You can go up on the rent every year. You can eat off the floors. It'll be great. If you don't, you might have an issue, right? But you need to dial in your screening process. So how do I do this, right? So I verify, well, the first one I talk to them, I say, if you lie to me about anything on your rental application, I won't rent to you, period. It's my policy. I've been lied to about everything. Don't put your brother, sister, cousin, friend from Facebook as your landlord. I'm going to find out. Be honest, be truthful. If you've gotten evicted before, if you have bad credit, whatever, tell me your side of the story. People make mistakes. I get it. It's all good. So I start with that. So hopefully they'll just be honest and upfront. Because the number one thing people lie about in their applications are their landlord references, right? So if someone's getting evicted, they're not going to put their landlord on their application. So what I do is once I get their application in, I go into the property records. I see who actually owns the property. If it's owned in a trust, a lot of times the name of the person, the trustee, will be right there on the county website and doesn't match. If it's owned in an LLC, I go into the state LLC lookup and I see who owns the LLC, right? And do those names match up? So that's going to weed people out pretty quickly. And then when I call the landlords, I ask them questions. So I'll have the property card right in front of me. See when they bought it. Do they own it in an LLC? Do they own it in a trust? Do they own it in their personal name? And then depending on what I get there, I'll go into Google Maps and I'll see a street view. Is there anything quirky about the property? So when I call the landlord, I basically ask them, I interview them before I ask them about the tenant.
Yeah.
And I tell them up front, I'm going to do it. I'm like, look, I've been lied to about everything. I want to verify you're their actual landlord. And a lot of times the landlord will laugh and appreciate it because I've never been asked that before. So, if you're talking to a brother, a sister, a cousin, and you say, hey, how do you own the property? They're going to be like, in my name. I'm like, okay, what's your name? And they're going to say, and they're going to hang up on you, right?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty easy way, and I put a little bit of weight if they've lived at their existing property for a long time. If they've lived somewhere for 8-10 years and they're moving because the property's for sale, and then I look it up on the MLS and it's actually listed for sale, then I'm like, okay, I'll put weight on the landlord. But if they've moved every 2 years, I don't care what the landlord's going to tell me. I'm going to want to talk to the landlord before that. Right. So I want to put no weight. If they moved in the last 2 years, I put 0 weight on their current landlord because they're going to lie to me to get them out of their unit.
Yeah.
But the previous landlord will tell me the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so I do that. And then I also I put right on my application that in order to rent one of my units, I have to do an in-person inspection at where you live currently. Right. So I would say 0.001% of investors do this. And it's the most important thing you can possibly do in renting to somebody, because if you go to their unit, right, if they lied about anything on their application, this has happened to me before, you're going to find out if there's a guy living with them that they said is not living with them because there's men's work boots or there's men's clothes in their closet. You know what I mean? So you're going to find that out pretty quickly. And also the biggest thing is people say, oh, I have like a mixed breed dog. And you're like, okay, cool. And you go to their house and they have like a kennel full of pit bulls, right? It's like, okay, well, you're lying to me and don't lie to me. You know what I mean? It's like, no, I'm not renting. And that's happened to me before. I went to somebody's house and I was greeted at the door by a guy who talked to me for like 10 minutes and just told me how he just got out of jail, like all this stuff. And then I went inside the house and they had a pit bull in a cage that like looked like it wanted to kill me. I'm like, all right. So I left and I texted her after. I was like, yeah, this is going to work. You lied to me about multiple things in your application. So, you know, and I would have rented to her if I didn't do that in-person inspection.
Right.
Right. And this lady I just evicted, if I did an in-person inspection in her unit 4 years ago, I would never have rented to her and I wouldn't have gone through an eviction. I wouldn't have been dealing with this right now. So that's why I said at the beginning, if you rent to a bad tenant, it's your fault because you were probably lazy with your application process. And the last thing that I asked for is a copy of their most recent utility bill. Why do I do this? Because when they move into your unit, if they have an outstanding balance on their utility bill from the last place they lived, they're not going to be able to put utilities into their name at your property, right? So a month, 2 months from now, when you're getting your bills in the mail and you're, you know, texting and calling them, hey, can you switch it over to Eversource? I'm like, yeah, I'm so sorry, I'll do it right now. Like they can't because they can't open another account until the last one's paid off. So I also asked for that. They text me a picture of it, and those are really like the big three things that I do to make sure that I get good people.
Yeah. Wow. That's really great advice. And it's funny you brought up the in-person inspection because the first Section 8 tenant that I had, this was a long time ago, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get screwed in this situation. Like I'm doing the most thorough check. And I did that. I met him over at his house and did a walkthrough and the place was spotless. I mean, kept it super nice. He was a younger guy, had a couple of kids, single dad, and he ended up being an awesome tenant. And yeah, I sold the place. He called me actually a couple of years ago and was like, hey, are you still the owner? I want to buy this place. And I was like, no, sorry. The new owner should have told you like 5 years ago when I sold it. But
Yeah.
He still thought I was the owner. But yeah, so I think that's great advice. And you're right. Like doing those little extra things makes a big difference. How do you I mean, you live down in Florida now. I know you're from Massachusetts. Yeah. So how do you maintain that relationship with inspectors? How do you manage all the boots on the ground stuff?
Yeah, so I have a woman who used to work at the housing authority who's come on and manage all my new units that I've been buying. So she's kind of taken that on. I still manage 38 of them myself, which is extremely easy. It's way easier than you'd think. But and my brother, I was able to take him on as a full-time maintenance manager. So he goes around to properties. Like I'm renovating 16 units right now, or I'm like turning and renovating. So he's kind of managing all that. And then I have the property manager, you know, dealing with the housing authorities, doing the showings, doing the in-person inspections. So prior to moving, because I was very like hands-on, like I was at the properties every day. I was walking around, I was meeting with people, doing everything, right? So I was nervous handing that off because I'm very type A, I like need to be in charge of everything. And it's been a learning process, right? I'm trying to teach my brother and the property manager like what I do and how I do it. And you know, if my property manager is like, hey, I got a great tenant, I'm like, okay, we talked to the landlord. No, okay, don't tell me you have a great tenant until you've already talked to your landlord, right? Like, oh, I have the paperwork ready to go. Like, okay, like where's the in-person inspection? I haven't seen the video yet. Oh, I have it scheduled tomorrow. Okay, cool. Don't send the paperwork in until I see the video. You know, so I'm still trying to keep them in check, you know, in hopes that from down here, I can really just be kind of overview, making sure things get done and, you know, and they're kind of taking care of their job. So it's been a lot of work doing that. I'm not going to lie, but I'm working less and less on them because they're getting it. My brother had done a lot of work in the properties too. And so it was really cool to be able to take him on and everything. So,
yeah, I see. Okay. That's great. And do you think you could start that way if somebody wanted to start being more automated, or do you feel like this is just more of a hands-on, you know, niche that you've got to be more involved?
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to buy properties that don't, because the most time intensive thing, honestly, is if you're buying a property and you're doing a massive renovation and you have to deal with contractors that you don't know, right? So you're probably going to have to be on site a lot more, at least have somebody there that you trust that can deal with that, right? And once you learn your systems and you learn everything, then yeah, doing it remotely. Like if you're going to buy properties that need to be like painted or like painting floors, like cosmetic stuff, like I don't know. I've realized how easy it is doing it remotely. Like you think when you're in it that you can never do it. And it really takes you to like move away to realize like, oh, this isn't like, as hard as I thought it would be,
Yeah.
but you're going to need, if you're doing it remotely, like you need a maintenance person that you trust that, when you say jump, they say how high, right? And you pay them quickly. Like I have a plumber and electrician now. If anything's ever needed, they go there immediately. I pay them immediately. I don't care what they charge me because I want, like, I don't, I made a lot of mistakes when I started out nickel and diming and watching every penny, but now I just want things done correctly in the right way so that they don't break 6 months from now. My tenants will call me again. Mm-hmm. So, one of the biggest things too is I have pest services on every single property. So because the two things I got called about the most, there's one, smoke alarms going off in the middle of the night, which is just like, I don't know how these smoke alarm companies put out so many faulty smoke detectors. It's insane. Like it's nuts. So I do all 10-year sealed units now. So hopefully I don't have a battery issue for 10 years. And the other thing was like ants, or like they found a mouse. Like there's mice in every property in the United States. Like I don't care where you live. Like you probably have mice in your house. You just don't know it. So I have pest services, and I put right in their lease. It's like, if you have any issues with pests, bees, ants, anything, you're on a yearly service. It costs me $360 a year. Call them. You can call them 365 days a year if you want. Don't call me, call them. It's there for you, and that limits that call. Like I haven't got called about pest stuff like since I started doing this, right? So yes, it costs me $360 a year, but it's a service that tenants love, and it's one less phone call I have to get. So, because honestly, managing my 38 units remotely, I mean, maybe an hour a week. So,
wow. That's awesome. It's amazing how much crossover there is from Section 8 to vacation rentals, which, a lot of people probably wouldn't think is intuitive, but same thing. Like initially, I didn't want to pay for pest services on every property, but now we do. It just, they come out every quarter and spray. They'll come back as much as we need them. Because that was a common thing, if like you said, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be, a mouse here and there. And then, the smoke alarm, same way, like we change batteries. Now we do deep cleanings every 6 months. So very similar, having a handyman. We don't do big gut renovations remotely. So there's so much that crosses over whatever strategy you're using. And I think you can do it remotely, but it's a total shift in mindset that you need to come up with and be comfortable with. And it takes a little getting used to, for sure. In terms of the extra like administrative and inspections, and so you mentioned, annual inspection, what does that look like? Is it a big lift?
I mean, so you have to, it takes a little bit to learn what the inspectors look for, right? So, and once you learn that and you pass the initial inspection when tenants move in, going on a year-to-year basis, it's not that difficult. There are some like little things that sometimes I get. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. But at the end of the day, like you have somebody in your unit giving you a free inspection every year. And if you want to be a good landlord, you should want to fix things when they break, right? So the paperwork comes in, like how it works is there's some vouchers that actually don't even require an inspection, right? Mm-hmm. So it really depends on what type of voucher your tenant has, right? So like there in Massachusetts, there's MRVP vouchers, which is a type of voucher, and they don't require inspections, right? So, which is great because it's one less thing, but I actually kind of like them because I have the inspector in there to kind of walk through everything. Then it gives us an excuse to go in and walk through and kind of see how the unit is. But the inspector goes out for most vouchers once a year. They walk through everything. They look like I was just failed the other day because like I had a light bulb out in a closet. I was like, okay. So, so I just texted the tenant, I'm like, hey, can you just put a light bulb in? And they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. I was like, all right, send me a picture. So they sent me a picture. I forwarded it to the inspector. Like, okay, thanks. Like, so it's some dumb stuff, but you got to think of the advantages, right? Like I'm able to increase my rents every single year without my tenants leaving by sending a piece of paper, right? Like, so if I don't want to go fix a light bulb or, go, fix something at the property, like, I shouldn't expect a rent increase. You know what I mean? So it's, right. There's, you got to weigh out what's important, and the rental increases every year are way more important to me than the inspections, even though they can be a little bit of a nuisance, but they get emailed over to me. I look at the list, I have someone go fix it. They come back out and reinspect, and that's it. Like I said, you need a good maintenance person that you can get this list, send it to them. They go out there, they fix it, and then hopefully they have a good relationship. If you're doing this remotely, hopefully they have a great relationship with the inspector and they can just text them pictures, right? So they don't
Yeah.
have to come back out and reinspect.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned your property manager and your brother who manages all the maintenance. Are those your only two team members, or do you have other team members as well?
Yeah, no, that's it.
Wow.
So, sometimes I think I'm like, am I spending more time managing my manager than I could just be managing these properties myself? But I'm kind of looking like, all right, well, if I want to do this correctly, I need a property manager. So like, just stick with it, train her
Yeah.
and, keep plugging along. And it's getting better and better every month, but,
Yeah.
it's a learning curve for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Does she just work specifically for you, or does she have like her own management company that?
So she started her own management company. She has some of my units and then some of another investor I'm friends with. She took on some of his. So she's trying to actively grow that. And, she gets excited every time I buy a new building. And so does my brother because,
Yeah.
they're paid based off of a unit count. So
Nice.
kind of can all rise up together the more units I buy, which is nice. So
Yeah. So how do you determine a new, or what are you looking for new properties today? I know this is a different environment than 10 years ago, probably when you started. So what to you is a deal? What metrics do you look at? That sort of thing.
I will not buy anything unless the cash flow is $1,000 per unit per month. And that's my it's my floor. If it's close to that, I'll still probably do it, but $1,000 a month is what I shoot for. So, and even in this rate environment, I'm getting that. So, and it's because I know Section 8 so well, right? And I know what housing authorities pay what. And it's so powerful when you don't have to speculate and you can go into a property and say, okay, there's a 3-bedroom here. I know I can get between 3,300 and 3,600, depending on what housing authority the tenant comes in with, right? So, okay, I'll run at 3,300. If it makes sense, I'm going to buy it. If I end up getting someone with that other housing authority that's 3,600, okay, I'm making $300 more a month, great, right? But I care more about finding for $300 a month with, if you're cash flowing $1,000, right, or you cash flow 1,200 or something.
Yeah.
I care more about having a really good tenant in place that is going to keep my property spotless. It isn't going to cause issues. That I'm buying multifamily. Like I just bought an 8-unit townhouse building, and I'd rather have a tenant I put in there that I know is going to be a good person and get along with the neighbors for a couple $100 less a month, knowing I'm not going to have a headache, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.